Hi. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jackie Lane from the Book Advisor, and today I'm chatting with Lynnaire Johnston, who is the author of Linkability, 4 Powerful Strategies to Maximise Your LinkedIn Success. Congratulations, Lynnaire. How long ago is it since you launched your book?
I launched the book in September, Jackie, in 2020, the big year, of course, for everybody, but I started it in January, and I decided to write the book before the COVID vaccine or the COVID virus hit us. So I was already underway with it by the time the world changed on a dime for all of us. So basically it took about 9 months.
There you go. So for those of you who don't know Lynnaire, I met Lynnaire a few years back when I started on my LinkedIn journey. And after a few years, Lynnaire and I teamed up to help her work on her book, Linkability. Lynnaire is known as the word wizard, having run a copywriting business under that name for more than 2 decades. Trained as a journalist, Lynnaire has worked as a radio announcer and newsreader, an editor, and as a senior writer for a large local government organisation. She now runs her own business and works with many companies and individuals across Australia and New Zealand. So wonderful to have you here, Lynnaire.
Thank you, Jackie.
So before we get into your book journey, what are you currently working on in your business?
Well, a number of things, because now that the book's all finished, of course, I'm on to the next projects, as you might imagine. So I do monthly webinars, and I am currently developing a membership site so I can share more about my LinkedIn knowledge with other people. Podcast episodes, I'm being interviewed on podcasts all over the world, and I thoroughly enjoy that because I just love talking about LinkedIn, as you know. And I am also just quietly going to be working on a new book, a smaller book, but also about LinkedIn, and an area of LinkedIn that is a little controversial and hasn't much been talked about before. So watch the space for that one, Jackie.
Oh, I like a good thriller.
It might turn out to be that too, the way it's going.
Great. Well, your book, Linkability, 4 Powerful Strategies to Maximise Your LinkedIn Success. What was the motivating factor for you to write and then publish your book? Because they're 2 quite different things.
They are, and it was an interesting development for me because I had no intention actually of writing a book. I'd been working on LinkedIn for several years, as you know, and working with my clients and enjoying the whole LinkedIn experience. And then one day I suddenly woke up, and this is literally what happened, and somebody had described me as an expert. And the Social Media Marketing Institute of Australia ranked me #1 in New Zealand in terms of LinkedIn experts. And so what do all experts have, Jackie? You know the answer to this question. They have a book. And so this happened just before Christmas of 2019. And so I decided there and then that I really had to take the bull by the horns, make the opportunity into something that was useful, and sit down and write a book about LinkedIn, because if other people could see value in what I was sharing, then I wanted to make sure that a wider audience was able to use that knowledge as well. So that was the motivator behind it. But getting it published was all about really making certain that the information that I had to share got into the right people's hands. And I wanted people, if people were seeing me as an expert, then I wanted people to know that I had information that might be of use to them. And so I wanted to get it out there and make sure that people could use some of the techniques, those 4 strategies, for their own LinkedIn and do a good job with their own profiles and in their own business as well. So that was really what was behind it. And the journey along the way took me to some really interesting places, which I'm sure we'll cover in our wee chat. But it was a really interesting exercise, and it had its ups and downs. It had its highs and lows, but on balance, and at the end of the day, I can look you in the eye and say that it was an absolutely amazing experience, and I'm so pleased I've done it.
Oh, that's great. And tell me, for those people who are listening to this, how much time did you really have to allocate to write, publish, and market your book? Because the time commitment is something that actually scares a lot of people off.
Yes, and I can understand that because it takes time. And for a lot of the work on a book, you have to do it yourself, particularly if you're the person with the knowledge. You can't just give it to someone else and say, here, write me a book. It doesn't really work like that when you are the knowledge, you are the knowledge base, unless you have a ghostwriter or someone like you who helps people write their books through a series of interviews and other ways that you work with people. But for me, I had to sit down and really focus on the book. So I, first of all, dedicated the first 2 hours of every working day to writing. And so that meant I got up early every morning and made sure that I didn't do anything else before I'd put in those first 2 hours of writing. And once the book was done, or the first draft of it was done, that's when it started to get a bit more tricky, because there were edits involved. And even as a professional writer, I worked with an editor, and I think that made a very big difference to what the final result looked like. And of course, you read it, you gave feedback and helped me with the structure of it. And so I think that it's important, and this is something I really want people to understand, is this writing might be a solo activity, but publishing a book is a collaborative one. And I hadn't realized that. I hadn't taken into consideration the fact that I would need help from other people. And again, that's something that LinkedIn has helped me with, has put me in touch with the right people through the networks that I've developed. And it simply wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been on LinkedIn, if you hadn't been on LinkedIn, and the other people that we worked with on my book project weren't on LinkedIn either. So that was central, I think, really to it all coming together. But your question was, how much time did it take? And I still had to earn an income while I was writing my book. And so I couldn't dedicate myself to it full time. I still had to be working. But I would say probably on balance, it took between 2 and 3 hours a day, every business day, for all of that time.
Okay, that's a serious commitment. But it's good to get a handle on that. And I think a really important part of this is that it's a commitment over time, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I'll write a book and that'll take about 3 months. But then there's all the other parts around it. And on an ongoing basis, now you might not be working 2 hours a day on it right now, the book's out, but it's still something that you still have to commit time to.
Yes, that's right. I think people forget that the book process is not just writing and publishing the book, it's what you do with it afterwards. And I've heard a very clever woman by the name of Jackie Lane say that it's almost more important to be working harder on the book once you have it published than on getting it there in the first place. And I absolutely agree. It is a long-term commitment, and you need to, I think, probably allow 18 months to 2 years after your book has been published to really make sure it reaches the audience that you intend it to.
Right. Yeah. Look, really interesting insight there. Now, Lynnaire, given your book talks about the 4 most powerful strategies, would you like to share with me and those listening, what are the 4 most important aspects of the book in your view?
Right. Well, of course, the 4 strategies for working on LinkedIn are connecting, publishing, messaging, and there's one more I've forgotten: collecting, publishing.
Hey, I've got your book here. I'll look it up.
I should have read up on that before we started this, shouldn't I?
Here we go. We've got connecting, publishing, engaging, direct messaging.
Engagement, and engagement is the thing I missed out, but is one of the most important aspects, because you need to engage with other people. As I've already mentioned, you're not working in isolation when you're writing a book. You're not working in isolation when you're on LinkedIn. It's all about developing and building relationships with people, and engagement on your posts and other people engaging on your posts is one of the critical aspects of that. So that's one of the most important things, I think, is to know what those 4 strategies are when you've written a book talking about that. All right, so there are a couple of other things I wanted to mention about the book. One of them is that I wanted to make sure that it had longevity. LinkedIn is a platform that continually changes, and I wanted to make sure that my strategies would survive major changes to LinkedIn. And so the way I've got that organized is that it can be, your strategies are useful no matter what it is that you're trying to achieve on LinkedIn. We're trying to run businesses, both you and I. And so that our objective, of course, is to bring in business. So making sure that you know how to do that with LinkedIn, I think is really important. So the book is all about showing you examples of how to do that in an easy and simple way for people who are not necessarily LinkedIn experts themselves and who just want to know how to use it for the best way possible for their objectives. And of course, I filled it with lots of examples as well, so that people can see how other people have used LinkedIn in their own businesses. So those are, I think, are the main reasons why it's a good idea if you're on LinkedIn or want to be on LinkedIn to use this as a kind of like a blueprint.
Great. And certainly I have taken some copies of your book and given them to people who look at me kind of blankly when I talk to them about LinkedIn, and they go, oh, well, I've just put my CV up there. And I said, oh, yeah, well, you're missing out. You know, here, have this book, go away and do your homework, and then let's have a conversation about it.
Yes, and I think that's a very common thing, because LinkedIn started as a recruitment site and as a place to put your CV, but it is no longer about that. It's more about your personal brand, about your credibility, your visibility, and it's really your major place online where people can find out about you. And I think that people don't really understand how critical it is to their businesses to have a really good presence on LinkedIn. So having an exceptional profile is one of the things that really underpins the book. You have to start there. And once you've got a great profile, then you can start connecting, engaging, publishing, and direct messaging.
Yeah, my problem is that I can go down long wormholes on LinkedIn. I actually really enjoy it, and enjoy meeting people and on LinkedIn, and then meeting them offline. So I thoroughly enjoy it, and so have to limit my time on it.
Yes, I can quite understand that, because it does get out of hand, that's for sure. But that's where those relationships that you're developing come from. They might start there because of a conversation that had began on LinkedIn. And I think that people underestimate the importance of the networking part of LinkedIn, where, of course, most of last year, none of us went anywhere really, apart from our own little bubbles. And so being able to do that on LinkedIn, where it's such a benign platform and people want to help, and you can learn so much. And I think that it's another reason that people should be spending a bit more time on LinkedIn. People still seem to think that it's social media, and it's not. It's a business tool, and one of those ones where I think that it's really important for particularly small business owners and, of course, authors to be making sure they've got a really good presence.
Right. Now, again, coming back to some of the kind of the production stuff around the book,
Yes.
What was the hardest part about writing the book?
Editing it. By the time I had read and reread, in some cases, chapters, 8 or 9 times, I was sick of it. And I think my editor was as well. So that was the hardest thing. And I also went through a period where I wasn't really, I think I had some doubts around it. And I think that fear of being thought of as a fraud, or not being seen as an expert, or whether you've actually got anything to say that people want to read. There was a bit of that. And so I had a short period in the middle of that. I'm generally an optimistic person, where I did go through the blues about it, and I really had to push hard to make sure that I got through that and out the other side. But for me, there were a lot of other people involved in this project. And so I felt that I needed to be accountable and do the job, get the thing finished. I regard it as a bit as something I was doing for a client, and it had to be finished. It couldn't just be started and left, because too many other people were involved, and I didn't want to let them down. And so I really just had to get the bloody thing finished, Jackie. And I did, and I'm really pleased with it. And of course, every time I think when you have a little blip like that, and you feel perhaps you're not worthy of what you're doing, but you come out the other side of it feeling stronger, and it makes you more determined determined than ever to get it finished.
Really interesting insight that. And tell me, what marketing did you do pre the launch, and you actually had a launch, and then after the launch, and what's been most effective for you?
LinkedIn, hands down, has been the most effective both before and after. So before the launch, I really did mostly my promotion on LinkedIn, and we did sent a lot of emails. I worked hard to get my email list together, which is the one thing, if you were to ask me this question, I would not do again, because I don't think that emails actually work nearly as well as direct messaging people on LinkedIn. And so that would be the thing that I wouldn't do again, but definitely on LinkedIn beforehand. And afterwards, after the launch, of course, which was a Zoom launch, because of course nobody was having in-person launches in September, I have been fortunate to be invited on podcasts and to be presenting at webinars, and also do more with LinkedIn. So what's happened is that this has got me noticed on the international stage in the LinkedIn industry. And so there have been opportunities that have arisen from that. But I go back to the fact that continuing to be on LinkedIn consistently day after day has by far been the most important thing for my marketing.
Right. And given the topic, probably quite sound too.
Probably, yes.
Now, what, I mean, you mentioned just earlier, that you've been obviously invited on some podcasts, but what has the book achieved for you? And did you have, I guess, let me swap the question around. What was your goal for the book? Has it delivered for you? And what has it achieved for you that perhaps you weren't thinking about?
Well, that's really what did happen for me, because my goal was really to become better known in New Zealand as a LinkedIn expert. But what's actually happened is that I've become known on the international stage as a LinkedIn expert. So that means it takes in Australia, the US and the UK. And I was fortunate to be added to a list of what they call LinkedIn rock stars, which sounds greater than it is really, but it's for me, it was a mark of having arrived, if you like, that they would consider me as being sufficiently knowledgeable to be a part of that international group of LinkedIn experts. So that by doing that, that has given me an international profile, which I hadn't expected. And so now I'm connecting with people from all over the world. And the opportunities that have come out of that have been really interesting. I was invited to present a webinar to students of a university in Uzbekistan, Jackie. Now, because of your interest in Russia and Russian, where Uzbekistan is. I actually didn't. And so the opportunities to do, now this was not something I was paid for, but every time I'm able to talk about LinkedIn and share my knowledge, more people benefit from that. And LinkedIn becomes a better place because people are doing it in a better way. And so I love to be able to give back in that way to students who might not otherwise be able to afford to buy my book, or certainly afford to be able to employ me. And so I'm able then to get my message to them through the medium of the internet and Zoom. And I just love it. I really enjoy those kinds of opportunities, and meeting different people who would never have come into my orbit if it hadn't been for my book. So it's had a profound effect, but not the one that I expected. And yes, the book has been selling all over the world, which again is interesting. But my major reason for doing it was getting the information I had out into the hands of people who could make use of it. And certainly it's achieving that.
That's great, and it's a lovely story too. Well, lovely journey. You might have touched on this already, but I'll ask the question. What was something surprising for you about the book journey, and what you're actually still on it? So, it's hasn't finished yet.
No, indeed it hasn't. I think the most surprising thing was the importance of collaboration. I hadn't realized how important that was, and how useful it was. and just how much I enjoyed it. I think I suffered a bit from not feeling worthy of other people wanting to collaborate with me. And I found that that simply wasn't true, that people were really keen to collaborate with me. And whenever I've presented opportunities to people about working with me, they've said yes. And other people have asked me to do the same, and it's been great. And again, that's something I think that I hadn't expected, and it has made a big difference to me because of the new people that it's put me in front of, and the different exposure and in different people's networks that I didn't expect at all. So I think that knowing and understanding about collaboration are two different things. I knew about it, but I didn't understand it. And I certainly didn't understand how it could make such a big difference to what I was doing and improve what I was doing, Jackie. That's the other thing, because when you collaborate with other people, everybody does better.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's worth keeping in mind when you have opportunities. And yeah, I think the collaboration thing was by far and away the biggest surprise.
And that's really lovely, you know, because in a world where we can't, in a way, we're just starting to down this part of the world, you know, get back in touch and actually see people and go out and stuff. To actually have that experience remotely is really just a really lovely touch point, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And when you work with people collaboratively, everybody's got skin in the game. Everybody wants to do well. And I think having that goodwill to begin with is a very important thing. Choosing the right people to collaborate with and to partner with, that's important too. But I think that LinkedIn gives us those opportunities because there's plenty of people to work with, and you naturally gravitate towards the people that you feel an affinity with. And you work better because of that.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so that's kind of the serious part. So I inflict this quick quiz on everybody, and whilst it may seem flippant, I have some very strong views about some of the answers to these questions. But well, I'd love to hear yours.
All right.
So here's a quick 7 questions.
Okay.
How do you read, ebook or print book?
Print.
Good girl.
I do have a Kindle though.
Yeah. Best place for reading, couch or bed?
Bed.
Oh, interesting. Marking books. Are you a page folder or writing in books?
Neither. Never, 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 never. In case you weren't clear about that, never, ever.
So how do you mark up books then?
Oh, Post-it notes.
There you go. Actually, I've got some here. This is one of my books.
Yes, exactly like that.
Reading style. Do you read a few, skip a few, or do you read from beginning to end?
If it's a fiction, from beginning to end. If it's non-fiction, I pick and choose a bit.
That's a really interesting comment there. Outside business, are you a fiction or non-fiction person?
Fiction.
Oh, I didn't want to pick that. There you go. In relation to sharing books, are you a hoarder or a giver?
I'm ashamed to say I'm a hoarder. I try hard to give, Jackie, but really at heart, I'm a hoarder.
I knew there was a reason we liked each other.
Many reasons, but that's certainly one of them.
Yeah. And writing style, Oxford English, I've got here Australian English, but we might say New Zealand English, or US?
Oxford, every time, Oxford. You Australians, honestly, I mean, you're not you Australians personally, but you Australians generally don't seem to know whether you're Oxford or whether you're US. And you see all kinds of styles, whereas in New Zealand, we do like to do things properly, Jackie. So it's Oxford all the way, except for the comma. I'm not a fan of the Oxford comma, I confess.
Isn't that interesting? I've only really got into that whole debate about the Oxford comma about 3 or 4 months ago, and but we won't go there. That's probably a whole webinar on itself. And here in Australia, we also have something called the Macquarie Dictionary.
Oh yes, it makes sense.
which a lot of people use, but it's yeah, I'm kind of Oxford
That
English.
reminds me about something I think is important, and that should be part of the question about how you write a book, is having a style guide. Setting up a style guide at the beginning of your book writing process is a really good idea, so that you don't find yourself halfway through going, do I do this way, or do I do it that way? And I think that that's really, my editor insisted on that before we began. So that's something I think is a really practical tip that people can use. And I based mine on the Guardian style guide.
Interesting. So when I'm working with people, I talk to them about a style guide, and I say, and I'm not talking about your wardrobe.
I think it's really important, and it made a big difference, saved a lot of time.
Yeah, and it does save a huge amount of time.
Mm.
Lynnaire, thank you so much for sharing your book journey with me today, and with the people watching. And I was going to say, if you had your chance again, would you go through the process? But you've already told us that you're writing a LinkedIn thriller, so I can't wait.
Absolutely. But I do want to say, Jackie, it could not have happened without you. And I'm so grateful, both for the help and assistance you gave me, and the support and the friendship, and the conversations that we've had about not only book writing, but about putting the world to rights. So I think that anybody who's listening to this should really consider very strongly working with you on this, because it made such a difference to me, and it would never have happened if it wasn't for you. Thank you.
Oh, look, Lynnaire, thank you. And no, I did not pay Lynnaire to say that.
No.
Thank you again for your time, and looking forward to collaborating with you on your next book.
Thank you, Jackie. It's been lovely.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.